Welcome back to Raw, the podcast. I'm your host, Allie, founder of TheCheekyClean and Conscious Cart, LLC, a modern resource for helping consumers live more consciously. And I'm so honored to be here today with Emily Sadri. Emily is a CNM, APRN, and the founder of, tell me, Aurelia Health, a hormones first telemedicine practice for women in midlife. A UPenn-trained women's health nurse practitioner and nurse midwife turned hormone practitioner, she helps women make sense of perimenopause and menopause with a more personalized, physiology-based approach, and is such a real one. Emily, welcome to Raw the podcast.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm so honored to have you because for a few reasons. One, I think the work you're doing is so important right now. More than ever, women are feeling lost, isolated, alone, and sick when it comes to our hormone health. And there's a lot of confusion when it comes to the resources available. And so I look forward to you kind of helping us navigate through some of that and helping people find a space where they can be heard and hopefully heal. But then also, I was telling you before we got started that I love your content. And you can see, I follow a lot of people in the health space, but you can really tell that you're passionate about what you're doing, and you can see your real personality behind the work that you're doing and the content that you put out. And it's very BS free, which is very on Cheeky brand. So
Love it.
I love it. And I first met you through Kate Tershin, who I had on the podcast and just spoke so highly of you, and think she's worked with you in the past, and I've been following you since. So it's been like a good year now. And again, I love the work you're doing and appreciate you coming on today.
Isn't the internet fun that way?
It is so fun.
We just get to like cherry pick our new friends.
So
It's the
true.
best.
And then Cleveland, it's like 1 degree of separation. So can actually meet you in person, which is awesome.
Yeah, it's so great. Well, I'm thrilled to be here and always love to find like-minded people who are thinking about things in a different way, who are sort of automatically saying, I want to question that, general medical advice that doesn't really resonate. Those are my people. So.
Yes, totally. I've shared a lot on the podcast, in my blog, just, in a public forum about my frustrations, anger, concerns with many of the systems that we've become normalized by, but health being one of them. My family personally had, really experienced and was failed, in my opinion, by modern medicine, or sick care, as I sometimes refer to it as. So finding resources like yourself and connecting them with not only our community, but, others outside of Cleveland, I think is really where we have an opportunity as consumers, healers, people in general, to start changing our mindset, start questioning these norms. But it only happens when we have people like yourself who are willing to share the knowledge to help build that awareness. So it's more than just the work you're doing. It's the content that you're putting out. It's those questions that you're kind of leading with that are helping people say, maybe I need to look at a different approach. Personally, I wish I would have had that awareness, in the past. So it's very powerful. I want to go back a little bit and learn a little bit more about you, because obviously you're a board certified nurse practitioner and a certified nurse midwife. So now a business owner and running your own practice, but had a prior life of sorts in this modern medical system. So going all the way back, you said you were raised in New York?
Upstate
New York.
Yeah, went to college in New York City.
Got it. So would you say you grew up in we're probably similar to the same age-ish generation. I mean, did you grow up in kind of this like convenience era? Did you have a family who was a little bit more aware and crunchier? Or were you growing up on like packaged foods like all of us?
Yeah, no, my parents were very politically and socially justice, they were very left on that side. So, and my mom was a little bit of a rebel. So I think I was raised, I was encouraged to speak my mind, to question things, and that was okay for girls to do. So in that way, there was a lot of good. On the other hand, my mom was a working mom. It was the 80s and the 90s. And so dinner was go to the freezer and pick out, whatever we should have. She would get these this meat subscription where it was like pre-cooked chicken cordon bleu. And, I don't really think I ever saw her like chop a raw vegetable. It was always frozen. And so I didn't really learn about food until I moved to New York City, went to college there, loved the amazing salad bar at NYU was like mind-blowing.
Yeah.
And then I worked in restaurants, in college and post-college, and really learned about food then and like what it is like to eat real foods. And I had my own health crises in my early 20s and just struggled with chronic GI issues, chronic sinus issues, and bronchitis, asthma things. And I was really raised by my parents in a conventional system where we had a family doc and we just did whatever they said. We took a lot of antibiotics as a kid, did allergy shots, did all the things. And my parents, weren't well, and they're only in their early 70s, and they're both really unwell today. And I'm grateful that I sort of had a crisis early enough in my life that I was in Barnes & Nobles. I think I was 22 years old, and just perusing that. Was before the internet was really like a place where you would get information. And I, had been on multiple rounds of prednisone and antibiotics, and I found this book called like The Sinus Survival Guide.
Oh my God.
It's just like this one thing, and it had all these questionnaires about like fungal overgrowth. And now I would probably read it and think it was actually like very narrow scope, but at the time it changed my whole life. Just that one thing, right?
Made you aware of something that's
I had no idea.
Yeah.
I had no idea. I mean, just things like as simple as dairy will make your sinuses worse. Like I didn't know that. I didn't know that sugar was making me sick. I just didn't understand any of that. And that's such an empowering moment when you get to release that, why is this happening to me, to, I see why this is happening to me, and I see what power I have to change it.
So true.
And so I really changed my health at that point and started to understand, impact that diet had. And it took me many years, and there were many iterations of, I wasn't as well resourced when I was 22. I was probably a little undernourished, didn't have the supplements that I have now, all the things, didn't have access to pay people with healing abilities to help me with different modalities like I do now. But it was the beginning. Yeah. It was the beginning. And around that time, I also, on like a very hot July night in Brooklyn in my apartment with no air conditioning, I remember very distinctly, I was reading The Red Tent by Anita Damant, famous book. And have you ever read it?
No.
So it's all about sort of like biblical times, but it talks about like women and how they would go to the red tent, like on their menses. And it's just this very incredible book about women and rhythms and kind of ancient societies, and it's fiction, but it's really cool. And I had this like download when I was reading that book, like, I think, if I wasn't going to do this, I was actually an undergrad for acting. If I wasn't going to do that, I'm not going to be a famous actress, then I would definitely be a midwife. Like I had that thought. Wow. And then I just sort of like, it passed through my brain. I read the book. I loved it. And then years later, when I was, out of undergrad and doing things like, getting my yoga teacher training, like every good person under 25 in New York City does, I came back to that. I just thought like, I was really captivated by the mother-child bond. And I was teaching music to moms and babies in New York. And I loved watching that act of what we now call matrescence, sort of the becoming of a mother, and how that changes someone, changes their internal architecture, their identity, their everything. And I just thought like, I want to be in that. I want to understand that becoming and that transition, and just sort of revisited that thought. Like you have those moments, right, where something from 10 years ago comes back to you. And I just thought, I think I'm going to be a midwife. And I didn't know you had to be a nurse. Actually, there's a few states where you don't have to, but that is the most common path. I didn't know anything. I hadn't taken a science class since high school.
And you were graduated from college at this
I was
point?
out of college, yeah. Wow. I was doing like my New York survival jobs. I had like a million jobs, and I was sort of auditioning, and I was just confused and young and having fun, a boyfriend, all the things. Yep. And I really felt called. And so within a couple of months, I was registered for nursing school. Yeah. And it was always to become a midwife. That was always the goal. I was really lucky that in the early 2000s, the New York City birth scene was like such a vibe. Just like the coolest, most educated people, lots of people. Birth was their second career. So doulas, midwives, childbirth educators. It was just a hotbed for like exchange of ideas, disruptive, opinions and thoughts. Incredible. The documentary, The Business of Being Born, had come out a little bit before that, done by Ricky Lake and Abby Epstein, where Ricky, chronicles her home birth and her journey, like to make that decision. Yeah. And it really questions the medical system, and sort of the patriarchal way that things were done and
Mhm.
how, women have birth kind of done to them. It planted so many seeds and it sparked something in me that has never died.
Wow. Well,
Yeah.
I think that, you said like this one moment, this thing came back to me. It's like, that's divine calling,
Mm-hmm.
truly. Like
Yep.
you are in the place where you're meant to be. And to
Mm-hmm.
now, which we'll talk about, see how it's really continued to unfold in such a meaningful way for you. I mean, that's incredible.
Yeah, I feel really
A
lucky.
lot of
Yeah.
people can't hear the calling. So it's a gift that at that age, you were able to notice it.
Mhm.
And, some of those little things that maybe felt silly at the time, YTT, yoga teacher training, things like that,
Yeah.
maybe were building your foundation to be able to
100%.
hear. And how cool that you were living in a place where you were having this exposure while you were going to school to this alternative way of thinking and
Mm-hmm.
maybe questioning things,
Yep.
because that, I'm sure, changed the trajectory of how now you're practicing.
Totally. Well, and I think I was at such an advantage because, I didn't go to nursing school at age 18.
Right.
I started at, 25,
Mhm.
and I came in knowing I was like playing pretend.
Mhm.
Like a lot of what you learn in nursing school is completely superfluous to becoming a provider,
Yeah.
especially, being a midwife. Wasn't sure that I was going to like venture out and do all that I had no idea that I'd be doing what I'm doing now, but I did know that I was like, definitely anti-establishment. I knew that
Right.
like taking care of really sick people in the hospital was not for me, even though I have a lot of caregiver in me, and I'm really good at that. And was very deeply fulfilled by a lot of what I did during that time. But I knew it wasn't a system that I was going to be able to survive in, that
Yeah.
it wasn't in alignment with what I believed, and that we were missing so much. And I mean, just the fact that we're serving people in the hospital garbage to eat while they're trying to heal high
That's
glycemic, processed,
insane.
disgusting food in plastic, heated in plastic. I mean, just
Really hasn't evolved much.
no.
Which is really sad and
No,
twisted.
how it's evolved is that they serve only Diet Coke at the Cleveland Clinic.
Oh my God, it's so bad.
Right. Like that's still the era that we're in. I
It's
mean, we
still the
live
era
in a
that we're in.
crazy, twisted, effed up matrix.
It's so true.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you had that foundation going into it, but then I'm sure it illuminated even more
Absolutely.
being immersed in the world.
Yeah, it did. And those things are always good, right? Because you have to have the contrast. If you don't have the
Exactly.
contrast, you can't really know how to define
Exactly.
yourself. And so, every step of the way, I'm thinking to myself, like, that doesn't seem right. Right. But it was also really nice to learn how to arm myself with, like, how do you interpret evidence and how
Yeah.
do you think critically about
Yeah.
something, and to really understand the medical framework.
Yeah.
And like, I respect that. I understand it. I still interact with, the medical mainstream when I need to for our
Mhm.
family. Like, let me get this person's input, take that, and then like, but I am sovereign in the choices that I'm
Mhm.
making. And I think a lot of people, especially women, have this perspective that like, the person in the white coat is going to tell them what to do and fix them and save them. And, that never was how I felt from the time that I was sick in my early 20s. I just knew I had no choice but to learn that like,
Yes.
it doesn't work that way. As much as I would love for someone to save me and fix all my problems, it just doesn't work that way.
Mm-mm.
And, working in birth, it was the same thing. It was like women are going to be most successful and feel most satisfied with their birth experience when they are driving the ship. In fact, one thing that we know about birth is that women's satisfaction with their birth experience has nothing to do with the outcome. So meaning vaginal delivery, C-section, epidural, not epidural, whatever, it has entirely to do with how they were made to feel by the people in the room. And so I knew I was learning all that stuff and collecting all that information. And so I was becoming like distinctly shaped as I am this type of provider. I believe these types of things. And that carried me, through my several years in graduate school and then my 5 years in conventional medicine.
Yeah. Yeah. So that sovereignty that you mentioned, I think is also so rare. And it almost seems that the more exposure we've had to, like mass look at society and social media and everything, it's like we've lost it even more.
Yeah.
And there's so much of this external validation and outside of ourselves guidance that we're looking for, when really it's in here that will always navigate us.
Yep.
And so I appreciate that so much, especially in a provider. Kind of going back to the doula midwife dynamic, I listened to a podcast up years ago, and it was really highlighting, it was with a doula, and it was really highlighting some of the things that you're talking about with, how birth has become almost a business
Mm-hmm.
in the hospital system, and how women so often are at the mercy of the system versus the experience that they deserve or that's best for their bodies during that process, and how a doula or a midwife can really be your advocate
Mm-hmm.
through that process. What's crazy is, and I don't know if it's a Midwest thing, and maybe
Mm-hmm.
you can shine some light on this, but I don't really know a lot of people who have used a doula or a midwife here in this area. Seems like it's still a little bit, not anywhere near as normal as it was in New York, but maybe it's more accessible and available because I do think, were you working as a midwife through a hospital system?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I was with a small federally qualified health center on the west side, and we caught babies at Fairview Hospital in Fairview Park. So, nationwide, less than 10% of births are attended by midwives. And that's not the same like in the United Kingdom and in New Zealand and Australia and Canada even, right? Other developed nations who have much better maternal and baby outcomes from birth, like less death, less morbidity, like less complications, because midwives are really experts in normal birth. And most midwives work in the hospital, right? Where we do just about everything that an OBGYN does except for surgery.
Yeah.
Right? We repair perineums, we prescribe birth control, we insert IUDs, all of the full spectrum of things. We do all of the same prescription management. We can prescribe narcotics if they're needed, right? Like everything, it's just that we're not a surgical specialty. But
So
why do we have a
interesting.
surgical specialty doing the vast majority of normal birth? Shouldn't they be just reserved for high-risk birth? And that's the model that's happening in a lot of other countries that we've just failed to get a foothold with here.
So interesting.
Yeah.
As a woman working with a midwife, what type of dynamic is that? Is it are you working with the same midwife from, throughout your whole pregnancy?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really depends on what model was set up and what kind of practice you're with. So, just like you can find a million different types of chiropractors and a million different types of OBGYNs, you're going to find a million different types of midwives. So there's midwives in big hospital-based practices where there's 12 midwives and maybe you see one for all your, care in prenatal. And then when you go in to give birth, it's whoever's on call. And then there's smaller practices. I had all my babies at home, partly because I wanted that relationship-based care.
Yeah.
I didn't want discontinuity. I wanted to know who was going to come and attend my birth. And really, midwifery care like that is like concierge medicine, right? It's like you can text her whenever you need. You have hour-long appointments, right? She's going to be there by your side at the whole birth and then for 3 hours postpartum.
Totally.
Why wouldn't I want that? Knowing that, of course, if there was a complication, we have a transfer plan in place. But most of the time, if someone's transferring from a home birth into the hospital, it's not an emergency. It's because of like slow or stalled labor, positioning, something like that. It's very rarely, like a lot of the emergencies that people think of with hospital birth are things that are downstream results of interventions.
So, and I think that there's almost like a little stigma around not giving birth in the hospital.
Sure.
And it's all fear-based.
Of course.
And I think birth in itself has become very fear-based.
Yeah.
I mean, I have my own trauma around the hospital system just with what my parents experienced there. I mean, to your exact point, it's like I'm like in the Cleveland Clinic taking care of them passing from cancer, and there's no healthy options that I would touch.
Yeah.
Much less the whole thing just really was crazy. And I think that's a big reason why I'm scared of having children, truly. And I am kind of at this point where I'm really thinking about, that next stage of my life and what that would look like, and have done a lot of research on how to do it in a way that's much more aligned with my values. Because the standard system, I can't tell you how many of my friends personally have these truly horror stories.
Do you know what the number one risk factor is for a C-section? The percentage of C-sections that your institution performs on an annual basis.
It's insane.
So like all of your risks around interventions are based not on you, but based on where you give birth. So like just walking through the door in a place that has a 40% C-section rate means that your risk of having a C-section is about 40%, right? So
wow,
it's just so depersonalized, right?
So
and we're so like disempowered from, the birth being about us and our own personal needs and risk factors. And, birth is about holding space and relationship. And it's about, a skilled birth provider has sat next to a woman over the course of 10 plus hours and watched the whole arc of labor.
Yes.
And there's very few OBGYNs that have done that. And that's no criticism to them. It's just like they're managing a labor floor with, 40 laboring patients, and they're going in and out of room to room. They're doing surgery, right? So they're just seeing
system isn't
glimpses.
conducive.
Yeah, they're not like watching the process unfold, right? When you're like providing one-on-one care and you're really in that state of like, if we really valued women, we would make it so that birth was set up this way.
And valued the process of bringing a life into the world. I mean, it's a spiritual dynamic.
Oh, for sure.
And to turn it into this business is disheartening.
Yeah. I mean, it's just it all comes back to like, humans always think that we can like hack the system.
Right.
And the longer that I practice medicine, even as much as I get into like all the cool biohacks and all the technology and the peptides and all those things, I always come back to like, how did nature design for this to happen? And how can I mimic nature? So that in that way, like shouldn't be surprising to know that, I was a home birthing midwife. I caught babies in the hospital, but I had my own at home, low intervention whenever possible, but I honored physiology and I respected it. And that was something that like midwives really wear as armor, is like we really respect normal birth and physiology. And I bring that into the way that I practice hormone care now.
So beautiful. How many kids do you have?
4.
4. Wow, that's incredible. So when you had your babies, were you still working as a midwife in the more traditional system?
Yeah, so I was in school for the first 2, and then for the second 2, I was working as a full scope midwife. When I was on maternity leave with my last, I quit.
Okay, so
2 days before I was supposed to go back.
Tell us a little bit about what led you to that decision, because that's a big decision to make in general.
Yeah.
But then just so close to a birth, I mean, you have so much going on. It seems like that would be the last moment that would make sense in making that decision. And I love that.
Yeah, well, it was
something that was like really telling you.
I was like 12 weeks postpartum when I made that decision.
Wow.
Yeah, I was supposed to go back to work. Like I had my schedule. There were people booked on my schedule. My dad wasn't well. My dad has Parkinson's. And so that was weighing on me. It was the middle of COVID. My kids were homeschooling. We had some support, but it was an interesting time in the world. And when I went back after my third baby was born, it destroyed me. It was diabetic in my third pregnancy. I was 35 when that baby was born. And the collective, year leading up to that birth, working on-call shifts, working like crazy hours in a very stressful environment really destroyed my already unstable metabolic status. So going back with 4 and imagining being on call again, driving across town, and I said, like, please do less. Like, can I just do some office time for the first year? Because, I mean, really just the fact that we ask women to do anything that high octane and high output at 12 weeks postpartum is insane.
Insane.
It's crazy. And it really did. I mean, I was living proof that it was destroying my health, right? No, like, despite all of my best efforts, it was like, no matter how I did it, I wasn't gonna be able to survive
mentally
healthy.
and physically.
100%. Yeah. And they're so connected for women. When we have, sympathetic overdrive and we're hypervigilant, it destroys our metabolism and our insulin resistance gets worse and all of those things. So I was so hesitant to leave. Like, I wasn't being malicious quitting at the last minute. It was so hard to say. Like, I didn't have a next plan, and I wasn't used to being that way, right? I was a high achiever. I always had another plan.
Girl, I know the feeling.
And even though I had these children that needed me at home, it was still like, how could I do that? And there was also a dogma in the midwifery space of like, we owed it to our profession to give our all. If we didn't give our all, then like birth as we knew it was going to be obliterated. As we knew it, like already less than 10% of births were attended by midwives. So we were really indoctrinated in school that it was like our responsibility to take up the charge of our foremothers and to carry midwifery forward and grow the profession.
Right.
And so I definitely didn't feel like I would have had the blessing of my professors to leave, even though we're supposed to be caring for women and like the profession was destroying my health. Yes. So I quit, and it was the best thing that I ever did and a catalyst.
But also probably one of the most courageous, to your point.
For sure. Yeah. And the best things that we ever do always start with an act of courage, I think. And it was great because we often think that like we need to always have the next step, but sometimes when you have that space created, it allows for something to enter in that you didn't even know was possible.
Yes.
And so when I first quit, I was looking for lots of different little opportunities. Like, what can I like to be, mentally and academically engaged, and I'm really passionate about my profession. So I explored lots of different options. I called a bunch of people. I had been doing a lot of studying of integrative and functional medicine. So I was looking to see if there was someone I could work for. And it was like crickets. I just didn't get a lot of bites. And I was so grateful. I met someone and she said, well, why don't you just like open your own practice? And I was like, what? No way. And so what I did, I finally did. The barrier for me was that in Ohio, you need to have a supervising physician co-sign. Like, it's just a document where they say that you'll talk to them if you need anything. like, of course, like I'll always consult, collaborate, refer. That's part of our profession, right? And just like a family provider would, a family doc, right? They'll send you to cardiology if you need it.
Exactly.
Just being a good practitioner. But some states, about 50% of them, have these laws in place where you need to have a document signed saying, like, this is my physician oversight. Physicians that work in big medical systems often aren't allowed to do that for people. They have things in their contract that say you can only do that for NPs within the system and not outside of the system. So it's a really big problem for women because NPs are predominantly women.
Right.
And it's a block for them to be able to open their own practices.
Yep.
So, and it was a huge challenge for me to like, who am I going to ask?
Yeah. And you said over 50% of the states?
50%
require
this. It's, varying laws in each state. How severe is it and what their rules are. But I finally, got up the courage. I cold called someone who I'd met and I thought liked me enough. And he was in private practice. And he said, sure, I'd love to help you. And so I opened my practice really with the intention of I wanted to make like $500 a week. That was my goal. That was it. I just wanted like spending money for anthropology.
Totally.
I'm serious. That's all I wanted. I wanted to just live. And I'm glad that I didn't set the bar crazy high because I think in a lot of other aspects of my life, I had always done that. And at that point, I was at a place where I just wanted to be able to nurse my baby and I wanted to stay intellectually engaged.
Yes.
I wanted to learn and have like a container to learn in. And I loved taking care of people, but it was a new thing for me. Well, that goal was like quickly outpaced by the reality, which was that I got really busy really fast because so many women needed better care. And at that time, I was really just doing functional medicine with, I would say, a female lens.
Got it.
Because of my background as a women's health nurse practitioner and a midwife, I understood hormones sort of, not as well as I do now, but from a basic perspective. And it became my workshop, right? That work over the last 5 years. I've completely changed the way that I practice.
Totally.
Because every person that I've worked with is a test subject in a way.
Exactly. And now you have this experience to not only go from your experience, but now all of these patients that you're working with and seeing the positive changes.
Yeah. And when you're not in an institution that says you can only do things this way, you're able to trial things. And when people trust you and say like, well, why don't we try it? We've really developed a completely unique and individual model of care that I think gets incredible results, which is honestly the thing I'm most proud of.
That's so incredible. So how long was that you started your practice?
5 years ago, April 1st, 2021.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
As someone who left a corporate mainstream job and started to do something on my own, have utmost respect for anyone who's willing to take the risk, especially who has been raised in this kind of like ambition, hustle culture.
Yeah.
But to do it with 4 children is another level. And so I think it really shows you joked and said, you just wanted some anthro spending money, but it's that mission in you and that divine calling that we talked about earlier in the episode that's led you there. And now you're helping so many people. So when you said you first got booked quickly, what were the type of patients coming to you?
Yeah, it was a lot of women who were maybe like a year postpartum and they, didn't feel like themselves yet. They couldn't lose weight. Their gut was off. And then it just so happened that because of the age that I was 39 when I started my practice, I was getting a lot of women in their 40s and 50s too. And they were all having the same issues. They were all like becoming insulin resistant. They were all experiencing, no response to the things that always used to work.
Yep.
Like cleaning up my diet, all the things. They were, fatigued, having hair loss, thyroid issues, all of the things. And I was applying all of the functional tools that I learned from the Institute of Functional Medicine, where I trained in the a couple years before I left practice. And the functional medicine framework is really like elimination diet is the gold standard. That's supposed to solve all the problems and supplements. And what happens in midlife is a lot of women end up on this merry-go-round of, more elimination, taking out more food, more restriction, more shame, more guilt, more supplements, a couple steps forward, a couple steps back. And I really felt frustrated and angry with the framework I'd been handed. I think that functional medicine as we know it is very much a male framework that we've copy pasted to females, just like on the conventional side, right? We don't have a model of female primary care. All that means is like you go for a breast exam instead of a prostate exam.
So true.
There's not like, we don't have a model of assessing female well-being that has a hormone lens. Yet, when our reproductive hormones are not functioning optimally, it trickles down and our whole system is affected.
Exactly. And so much disease births from that.
Yes. And so I was just like, this is ridiculous. Like, I'm making women feel bad. I'm like using so many supplements, and I was using some low-dose hormones. I wasn't like I wasn't unfamiliar with that. I used progesterone and I used estrogen and I used Biest, which I'm embarrassed that I did now, because that's what we were taught. That's what like functional people did. It was like estriol was safer and like less offensive. And so it just sort of happened that I was having this personal journey with my own patients, finding that the tools that I had weren't working. And outside in the rest of the world, the menopause movement was beginning. In the early 2020s, people were talking about HRT. People were talking about how it's safe, right? Just last year, the black box warning was removed from estrogen products around breast cancer and stroke. So, that was all happening in the conventional space. And there was a lot of, press around the Menopause Society and kind of their protocols and standard dosing. And so I did a lot of that stuff and still I was like, this is not good enough. Fortunately, I'm a Virgo and I'm like very perfectionistic, and I really won't settle for I'm a little better. And I also have always refuted the idea that symptom control is our goal. I think that women are really powerful and we don't just need to be placated and made to feel a little bit better. Mm-hmm. We need to be empowered and resourced. Yeah. And that's a very different thing than here, this script should make you feel a little bit better. And a lot of functional medicine honestly had become symptom management medicine. And I just didn't like any of it.
Really overwhelming.
Yes.
And unattainable.
Yes.
Agreed.
And expensive and demoralizing. Yep. And and what it always came down to, especially for the women in midlife, was if you could just really get a handle on your stress. It's really your cortisol that's causing all these issues. Well, when estrogen becomes dysfunctional and disorganized in perimenopause, estrogen is a major regulator for the vagus nerve. And we don't have the ability to dance between parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system responses when estrogen is going offline. Yes. Everything begins with, it's funny because there's a book I think called Everything Begins with the Egg for a fertility book, but really everything freaking begins with the egg. The egg is what makes estrogen, right? It's our follicles that secrete estrogen in our ovaries. And so the more that I was doing this, I was like, it's all lines tie back to this one origin point, which is when estrogen becomes dysfunctional. We every year become more insulin resistant. We start depositing more visceral fat. Our cognition changes. Our capacity to hold stress changes. Our sleep architecture changes. Our circadian rhythm is messed up. And. Yes. And no one is talking about this essential core truth. It doesn't make any sense to me.
And it's you can tell someone over and over again, regulate your circadian rhythm, go to bed at this time, stop looking at lights.
They try. It doesn't work.
They can do all the things, but if their estrogen is off, it doesn't help.
Correct. And you're just, again, making them feel hopeless. And so I was like, this low dose estrogen crap is just not working. And I had this patient who came to see me. And within 10 minutes of meeting her, she was a nurse and actually a nurse practitioner in her former life, but she had just entered the workforce again a couple years before after raising her 3 kids. And she was a school nurse during COVID. And I met her. She came to me as a patient. She came to my office for an in-person visit. And within 10 minutes of meeting her, I said, do you want a job? Because she's got the best personality. Yeah. And we just had a connection on a spiritual level. Love and that. I knew that I needed this woman in my life. And she changed my practice. She, was in her late 40s and she was 48 when she came to me. Her metabolism was out of control. She was having extremely heavy bleeding over the last few years. And she refused to accept a marine IUD or birth control. She had tried those things. She just didn't want to do them. They weren't working. It wasn't fixing anything. And her biggest complaint, aside from the metabolic stuff, was her sleep was a disaster. Right. And nothing she did. She tried some progesterone, all these things. And I started out down the same path that I always did. We did a Dutch test, which not opposed to, but I don't do them categorically anymore. I did at the time. A Dutch test and labs and all these things. And, I told her that she was estrogen dominant. I now don't really believe in that term. We tried low dose things. And, she was such a willing and trusting partner in this process. Yeah. And at a certain point, she came to me and she said, because we were both, I'm always very open with my patients. I think one of the most important qualities in a provider is humility. And I'm never going to be I know everything, right? Your body actually really freaking well.
Everybody's different.
Yeah. And I need to learn from you. Mm-hmm. You tell me what you're experiencing.
We're partners in this healing together.
Totally.
Wow. How unique is that?
It should be how it is. Yeah. We're not ordained,
all-knowing wizards.
No. Yeah, and so we were really in this partnership together, really trying to figure this out. And we're really good problem solvers together. And she said to me, one day she came and said, I think I figured it out. And I was like, what is it? And she's like, I found this other thing that people are doing. And I was like, What is it?
Yeah.
She's like, well, we're signed up for training on Friday.
Love it.
Essentially, there's this group of mostly physicians. Most of them were in California, practicing something called physiologic HRT. Used to be called physiologic restoration. Before that, it sort of was birthed from something called the Wiley Protocol. T.S. Wiley was an anthropologist who published a book in 2002, which was the same year that the Women's Health Initiative came out with all of that scary knee-jerk reaction to the evidence, and said that like basically estrogen kills people and causes breast cancer. So it was a very interesting time for this book to come out that basically said, hey, if we're going to be replacing hormones, because we've been doing it for a couple decades at that point, right? 70s, 80s, 90s, there's a history there. She said, if we're going to be replacing hormones, because people were questioning in the late 90s and early 2000s, are hormones a longevity medicine for people?
Right.
Are they going to prevent cardiovascular incidents? That's what the WHI was studying, does it reduce cardiovascular impact for women? So people were asking this, and T.S. Wiley said, if we're going to be doing this, wouldn't it be best to deliver hormones in a rhythmic way that matched the way that nature has our hormones behaving in our reproductive years? So when we're menstruating women, say from 14, 13, up until about 35, our optimal years, right? Our cycle undergoes a very specific rhythm and pattern every 28 days, let's say on average. And so from days 0 to 5, like day 1 is your bleeding. So day 1, you bleed, your hormones are low. Around day 5, the brain sends a signal to the ovary and says, like, time to crank out more estrogen. Estrogen rises from days about 5 to roughly day 12. And this will vary by a couple of days from woman to woman. And that peak of estrogen is actually about 4x the level that estrogen was on day 5. So your estrogen, this is why people will say, oh, you can never test estrogen because it changes too much. Well, your insulin and your glucose change all the time. We figured that one out.
Right.
100%. Like this is the endocrine system, you guys. It is dynamic and fluctuating. It's not rocket science, okay? So estrogen peaks to about 4x, meaning that like on day 5, your level might be 100, and on day 12, it might be 400. Literally, this happens, right?
Wild,
and every menstruating woman, and that peak of estrogen triggers a cascade of events, tells the pituitary to release luteinizing hormone. That's what you test on like ovulation predictor sticks. Luteinizing hormone peaks for a short period of time, less than 24 hours, and that triggers the release of a follicle from the ovary. Okay, when that follicle releases, that's the egg, it leaves behind a little bit of tissue called the corpus luteum. And the corpus luteum secretes progesterone for 12 to 14 days. So estrogen, after it rises that high, it falls. Testosterone actually surges then it kind of normalizes. And then after estrogen falls, progesterone starts to be secreted and estrogen kind of rises again. And so it's like a 2-hump camel. Big surge of estrogen and then big surge of estrogen and progesterone.
Okay.
These hormones don't just do this to create a uterine lining and a period.
Right.
And to create a body ready for pregnancy. The whole female body has evolved to respond to this system in this process. So when estrogen peaks, we recreate bone architecture. We prime bone to be turned over. We create new stem cells. We nourish our hair follicles. We turn over the internal lining of our blood vessels. So when plaque accumulates as we age, it's really because we're not getting that same turnover. Estrogen is like the gas pedal. It kind of regenerates everything system-wide. Okay. It turns the liver on, so the liver can now regulate iron. So we get screwed up iron stores when we go through perimenopause. It regulates lipids and cholesterol. So it tells the body, okay, let's clear out this LDL, let's excrete it. It basically governs every physiologic process in the body.
Wow.
Okay. So estrogen peaks. When progesterone peaks, it releases something, or it triggers something called P53, tumor suppressor gene. This is like the off switch. Okay. This goes around and it cleans up zombie cells, senescent cells, which you've probably heard of, right? So potential early cancer cells.
Got it.
That peak of progesterone is very important. Progesterone is also actually what builds bone. So when progesterone peaks, it solidifies the bone. So it's not just this like 2 lines straight across that you have estrogen and progesterone, and then those lines kind of like fall out in menopause, right? This is a rhythm as much as it is like having the hormones or not. And no one taught me that. And I was really pissed when I learned.
We should be taught that in school. Much less like going through nursing school.
The foundations for this. Like I was really into fertility awareness method, and like I read the book Taking Charge of Your Fertility when I was in my early 20s, and I sat at the feet of Ina May Gaskin, who was like she's one of the foremothers of the natural birth movement. And that night I pulled out my own Mirena IUD. Like I had the seeds planted for thinking this way, and I understood how our fertility was a fifth vital sign, how our period was a proxy for our total wellness. But I never understood that all of the metabolic issues that I was seeing in my patients, like a woman who was wearing a CGM and would eat a bowl of Brussels sprouts and then her blood sugar would spike to 150, that makes no logical sense. Right. It's Brussels sprouts. It's not even rice,
Yes.
And that's because that peak of estrogen creates incredible insulin sensitivity on a cellular level.
Got it.
And so when it flattens out and becomes erratic and chaotic and disorganized, that woman becomes metabolically compromised.
100%.
When I figured this out, and again, this woman had heavy bleeding, which we're always taught, and I was even taught that heavy bleeding is associated with high estrogen, right? It makes sense. Again, we're trying to apply linear masculine thinking to something that's distinctly not those things.
Yes.
Right? Women are cyclical, we're rhythmic, we're circular. And you cannot apply linear thinking to our health. You just
100%.
Simply cannot. And I wish I had understood that sooner. So this woman had heavy bleeding and
like outside of her period or just during her
during her period. But it was like, a lot of women will say like I'm flooding when I have my period.
Yeah.
Like this is very common in later perimenopause, right? And it's simply because there's such disorganization and receptor activity.
Mm-hmm.
And ovulation is not robust, but like when you try progesterone alone in these people, going from the theory that it's just because ovulation is like not present or not robust, it doesn't work. What you really need to prime those receptors and to create an environment for a stable uterine lining is a peak of estrogen.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we put her on this protocol, it was like her entire life changed, right? And her sleep started to come back. And every woman has little things that are like their tell, like they know, like if I start waking up at 3 or 4 in the morning again, like something's off or whatever. And she was just so dialed in.
Mm-hmm.
And I found out like years later that she was a math major in college.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this makes so much sense because she was so data driven around like everything. And so she was the perfect first person because she was so like on top of everything. And we just became this little lab where we really figured everything out. And like, I really feel that God sent her to me, to learn this.
Yes.
And I could cry, like can't. She's just so special.
That's so incredible.
She became, and she's working for me. So we launched this really quickly. I'm an activator. As soon as I figure something out, like I'm testing it.
Yeah.
And now 75% of our patients who are on HRT in our practice, if not more, are on this type of protocol. Yeah. And the results that we get are just so markedly different. And I really see it as like two different worlds. Like the world of static HRT where you're getting, straight across patch or gel or something is like, that's the masculine symptom management, symptom suppression. And yes, are there some disease preventative benefits to that? For sure. Could we be preventing osteoporosis? For sure, but not to the degree that when we do rhythmic. And in fact, there's very little research on PHRT. There's really just clinical experience and docs that have been doing this for 20 years with good outcomes. But the first research that is going to be published will be comparing static HRT to rhythmic HRT with osteoporosis outcomes because it will reverse osteoporosis.
Absolutely. And other, like you said, metabolic issues, autoimmune issues. I mean, there's no surprise that oftentimes it's after birth that women are experiencing these autoimmune issues that they've never had in their lives before.
Yeah, because estrogen is a major immunomodulator, major event that causes a dynamic hormone change. So onset puberty, we'll see autoimmune stuff crop up then for some kids. And then, in a transition time and postpartum, right, are the biggest moments in a woman's lifespan when she'll have a new autoimmune disease. But we see, I had a patient who came to me at 45, very healthy. She actually has a huge health platform. She's a really educated person, and her A1C was 5.8, which is pre-diabetic. And there was nothing she was doing wrong. Like she was super healthy, and we didn't do any peptides, nothing. We just put her on rhythmic protocol, and it came down to 5.2.
So is each rhythmic protocol different?
So, it's very customizable. It's delivered with a transdermal cream and a ToppyClick device. So each click is a 0.5 milligram of estrogen, and each woman gets a card, and then we decide on their dosing protocol. So they're either on initial, -1, -2, -3, or +1, and so on. And we, depending on kind of their degree of hormone decline and disorganization, we choose a layer, so level. So someone who's like later perimenopause or postmenopausal will start at initial, lower if they're in peri, and then we can make little adjustments. So your dose will change, from days 1 to 5, and then 6 to 8, and then 9, 10, 11, 12, and then it drops 13, 14. And if some people are more sensitive to that drop, it's extremely customizable. We can split the doses up to 3 times a day. I mean, it just is sort of endless opportunity.
Yeah.
And it's not for everybody. It's sort of like, I always end up in these spaces like, home birth is not for everybody. It's like
Right.
less than 1% of people give birth at home. But for me, it was the absolute right choice. And for some people, this is the right choice for them for the way that they want to manage their hormones, especially for the people that are like, this is really the best form of female biohacking that exists, in my opinion. Our hormones are the gateway to health. And if you want to do them, in a way that honors your physiology and it's going to have the most downstream benefit systemically, this is the way to go. But it's not set it and forget it.
Yeah, no, exactly.
And
that set it and forget it is kind of the way that, again, I'm not going through the process, but I have friends who are kind of like getting this runaround in the modern system and just given this kind of like flat solution of an HRT and then having these other things arise still that they're trying to manage. And then they're being given other symptom management medicines and things like that.
Totally.
And so it just becomes this hamster wheel.
100%.
And the women aren't feeling better.
No, and they feel guilty because like women like to take responsibility for everything that's happening to them.
Yes, yeah. And the majority of patients in the functional medicine space are women. Like we're willing to take control of our health and try to figure it out. And when
what's
we can't,
the average functional medicine patient? Like a 45-year-old woman.
100%.
Every time. She's got lupus or some like Hashimoto's, she's bloated, she's distended. Like I am so mad that I was never taught that all originated 10 years ago when she started to like have ovarian decline. Like, we've all seen that chart where your fertility declines with age and how like it slowly declines until 35, it falls off a cliff. Why do we have that understanding when it comes to our reproductive capacity, but we don't translate that to the fact that our system is changing because our follicle reserve is different? So they're one and the same.
So what are your thoughts on why we don't have that info? Is it just mostly because of kind of this like patriarchal world that we've lived in where the majority of medicine systems, everything was designed around men's health?
I think that, the practice of medicine as we know it it's a pharmaceutical practice, right? So medical school, even in like my education, so much of what I learned was just, this is how do we make a diagnosis and then what are the treatments for it? And, of course, you would learn some non-pharmacologic things to do, but by and large, like when we learned about abnormal uterine bleeding, that's like adenomyosis and endometriosis and fibroids and polyps and all the things that can cause bleeding issues in women. We sort of learned how to diagnose and identify them, and then we learned how to treat them. And like there may be a little bit of, this is more associated with women who have this issue, or this might be caused by this, but there's really not that inquiry around the why.
Yeah.
And there's not the tracing back to, in an optimal physiologic situation, what is actually breaking down for this to happen.
Cause?
Yeah. So I think, I don't know. I think it's just a really strange, reality that we live in.
Reality, but I will tell you, there are more and more and more women who are having personal experiences themselves or with patients that are in the service provider space that are taking initiative. And I'm sure you know this and are building a community of your own to provide this type of health and help to women, which I think is so incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the future of, and I even think about it. It's like, I always say like the chemotherapy is what, like ruined my mom's brain. But I mean, there was never any talk about the relationship between how the care for her during breast cancer coincided with her hormonal system, menopause, how any of that played into even getting breast cancer in the first place, And so it's like we're gaining these tools for health and longevity on such a bigger scale than just not having hot flashes when you're having.
Yeah, I think the conversation is going there. I think it's going there. And years ago when we were doing this, I was very wary about speaking about it too much because, we're really raised in the medical system to be hypervigilant around criticism from our peers. And we've all had the experience where someone's made us feel like crap in a medical setting in front of other people and humiliated us. And now, I'm talking to lots of providers that their toolbox is more conventionally minded. But they're extremely open to what I'm doing, and they're really willing to learn and ready to learn. And so I do think, especially as of a couple of years ago, only 4% of all women eligible were even on HRT.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean it's abysmal. So like if like someone getting a patch in progesterone, like good, like good for you, like do that,
right?
And like anything is better than nothing. And if you want to take it further and you're like really interested in systemic restoration and feeling like a lot better and I like to say kind of aging in reverse, which,
Yes.
again, not data driven, but subjectively so. That's how I feel that this
Absolutely.
protocol works. Then this is for you.
Absolutely. So and also it's like just side note,
Mm-hmm.
thinking about the functional side of things. And it's like we can be putting people on all these different supplements and it's like sometimes the supplements, that's why I made one, are full of all sorts of other shit. And it's
Yeah.
just like, again, this hamster wheel.
Yeah.
Outside of the protocol that
Mhm.
you're providing, what are some other basic things that you're interested into or doing differently as compared to maybe some other providers out there?
Oh,
Like you
yeah.
mentioned peptides, a thing that you're working with on a
Yeah.
consistent basis.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I love to beat the hormone drum, but we do so many other things. And I also like to say, like, you can't treat hormones in a silo.
Right.
It's not going to work in a system that is under-resourced and inflamed and broken. So all of our patients get a big lab panel, and we're always looking at, micronutrients and inflammatory patterns, metabolic patterns. And all of our patients are working with functional nutrition. We have somatic coaching. So, like, we really
cool.
take a full body approach. And, this is an opportunity in midlife for women to reset their framework, right? The running on empty, the skipping meals, the undervaluing yourself, the overgiving, the self-sacrificing, like, it's just not going to fly anymore.
No.
And so it's an opportunity and a window for you to learn really how to set up a lifestyle that, like, doesn't feel effortful, shouldn't feel hard.
Yeah.
And I think that's the benefit of using HRT, is that we can make it so that, like, it should feel easy to go to the gym. We also do use a lot of GLP-1s. I think they're incredible medications. We never, again, use them in a silo. I could have made a lot of money just being a GLP-1 dispensary, but it was not in alignment. And so all of our, GLP-1 patients have a lot of attention from nutrition and lifestyle. And, on the mental health side, we do supplements and, talk about kind of the full spectrum and all of the parts and pieces to that. Microbiome support. And we work a lot with autoimmunity, because there's so much of that in women. And so we use a lot of things like low-dose naltrexone and different strategies and, things that are a little bit off the beaten path.
I love that. You're really taking a full scope approach of providing the resources while also the foundation. And I think that's where sometimes we miss the beat is there is incredible value that can come from GLP-1s.
Yep.
But just giving it without the framework, without the foundation, that's where things get tricky.
Yeah, it's like one slice of the pie.
Exactly.
You got to do the rest.
Yes, totally. What would you say are some common indicators that we may be entering perimenopause?
Oh, yeah. I love this question. I think that the first signs for most women, not all, but for most, they're easy to remember, metabolic changes. So I didn't change anything with my diet or my exercise, but I'm gaining weight around my belly, or my body composition is just changing. My arms are softer. I don't gain muscle as easily at the gym. I feel tired after meals. So, like, blood sugar irregularity. My hunger cues are messed up. These are like signs that there's insulin changes in the background. And then the second one is mental status changes. Like, I have more anxiety. My PMS is worse before my period. I'm irritable. I'm more mentally fatigued. I don't multitask or handle stress as well as I used to. I can't shake off stress like I used to. I always make the analogy that, I have little kids, so stuff gets broken. So if my kid, like, knocks over a glass of juice and the glass shatters and now there's juice everywhere, and I've got dogs that I need to corral, kids that are barefoot, like, I'm stressed out for a second. My heart rate's going to go up. I'm trying to figure out how to fix this. I don't care, but there's a stress response.
Just managing it,
Yeah, it's a stress response that's natural and physiologic. And then when it's all cleaned up and said and done, like, I should be able to release that stress and feel normal. But in perimenopause, because you can't balance your parasympathetic and sympathetic, you feel the feeling that stress is still lingering on your body, even when it should be gone. And that is important to pay attention to, because, again, women, like, overthink all of these things and are constantly looking for circumstantial reasons to justify why they're feeling different. And it may not be your partner, it may not be your financial worries. Like, it may, if you're waking up at 3 a.m. and you're ruminating, that's a circadian rhythm issue, right? Yeah. And a lot of people will talk about how progesterone is the predominant sleep hormone, but I disagree. First of all, because you only have progesterone in your cycling years for half the month. Do you not sleep for the other half?
Right.
Like, are we all progesterone deficient? No. Our sleep architecture is governed by estrogen, the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the brain that receives light signals and tells your body when to secrete cortisol, when to secrete melatonin, which are the hormones that govern our sleep and wake cycles, is covered in estrogen receptors.
Yeah.
So if we lose our estrogen, like our circadian rhythm gets wonky. These are the women that have, cortisol, your cortisol spiking.
Yep.
This is why if you have a glass of wine, it's another sign of perimenopause. Why I can't drink wine anymore. It makes my sleep trash. Why?
Yeah.
Because when you drink a glass of wine at 7 p.m., it's going to crash your cortisol and your body takes a while to respond to that. So initially it might make you like fall asleep faster or something, but then you wake up like stressed out at 3 a.m. because your brain has like tried to correct that crash. And now you've got a cortisol spike at 3 or 4 a.m. So those are the biggest signs that I see first, but it's not ubiquitous. Some women will certainly present with vaginal symptoms or hair loss or other random things. But by and large, low libido, all those things. But by and large, it's like it's a mental thing. And it's a metabolism thing. And that gets so written off. It's like, here's your SSRI, work on your lifestyle.
Yes.
How many coaching programs exist on the internet to try to solve this problem?
100%. It's so true.
Yeah.
And it's like you could be just like starting the process of rebalancing your hormones in a way that would allow you to do the exercises that help heal your body and feel good and things like that.
Yep, it's both and.
What age around?
I think that I think that there's a marked thing happening between 41 and 43.
Okay.
I just see that.
Yeah.
So again, it's not everybody, but I see that this is accelerating between 41 and 43. But I also see lots of women in their 30s, late 30s, or postpartum, because you also have postpartum depletion that we're dealing with, which can mimic perimenopause. And if you're postpartum and breastfeeding, you're essentially menopausal, right? If you're breastfeeding it to the point where you're suppressing your periods, you're not ovulating. You're not making a lot of estrogen.
Absolutely.
So you're in a relative period and you're also depleted because we lose like 40% of our mineral stores when we're pregnant.
Wow. So
and in breastfeeding, right? So I think that that's a really under-recognized area of study. And we're not equipping women at all. Like, if you're having a baby over 35, like you might have more symptoms. You might feel like it's harder to get back on your feet afterwards.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about fertility. After 35, for example.
Yeah.
Like, and even now we're seeing women that are getting pregnant in their early 40s. Is there an opportunity to have more successful fertility if we are maybe rebalancing our hormones or going through this type of protocol?
Yeah. There's so many good thought leaders in the fertility space. Amy Ropp and my friend Nicole Jardim and lots of really amazing people. And it's certainly not like my core focus. I do quite a bit of it in my private practice, but it's so interesting. What we've found is that when we do physiologic HRT on women who have like low amplitude estrogen in the first half of their cycle or poor progesterone, luteal phase deficits and things like that, when we put them on PHRT for 3 months alongside like an ovarian reserve protocol, which would be lots of antioxidants and healthy fats and things that we know like slow ovarian aging and improve follicle health. Right. There are like very specific diet protocols that work really well. When we do them together and we also maybe use some other peptide strategies, we do get better. AMH gets better. IVF outcomes are better. People get better retrievals. So yeah, I think, estradiol in and of itself is an anti-aging hormone. It's anti-inflammatory. And so I do think that there is something there around like it actually preserving follicle health, but that's largely like clinical observation.
Got it. Very cool. Yeah, I don't know. I have this weird feeling about this business behind IVF. And it's just like something that doesn't sit right with me with this jump. At any age, even in low 30s, high 20s of like going immediately to saying that you have to do this. Like something in my gut just tells me there has to be an opportunity to rebalance.
Oh, for sure. And there are so many things that you can do. And I think that is the part that women feel bad about. It's not like I'm categorically against that intervention when it's needed, but the idea that just because you haven't gotten pregnant after 6 months and you did 2 rounds of IUI or Clomid, like then there's no other exploration done. It's a lot of data on like microbiome and micronutrients, and there's so many parts and pieces. We need both and, right, with all of these things. And we need to give women the opportunity and also not gaslight them or invalidate them if they want to explore like all of these other tools and they want to do both.
I think something that's missing there is this like opportunity too, like you said, for IVF to be more successful if we are also regulating the hormones, regulating the gut,
for sure,
strengthening the ovarian function. the success rate seems like it would be so much more probable.
Yeah, I think the biggest problem is, again, everything is so algorithmic in medicine.
I
So
know.
if you've been trying for, 6 months or more and you're this age, like we recommend, and it's all just based on getting the most people pregnant, and by and large with a population that isn't resourced to know all the other things to do,
Exactly.
and so it's really just how do we make better numbers, and we're not, we're so far away from really taking care of people's whole bodies.
Yes.
That is normal in that world.
One more question as it relates to fertility. What do you feel about birth control? Is it something that we are experiencing, say, if we were put on it when we were younger? Is it something that we continue to have issues with rebalancing our hormones later in life, even years after we've come off of it type of situation? Or do you believe that it can be something that can be re-regulated pretty quickly?
Yep.
In
Yeah,
your
there's also
experience?
really good stuff on this. There's a book called Sweetening the Pill that I recommend. The Business of Birth Control is a film by Ricky Lake and Abby Epstein that I recommend. Yes, the answer is, especially the combined oral contraceptive pill, which is, ethinyl estradiol, synthetic estradiol, and some kind of synthetic progestin, varies from different pill. It shuts off the whole HPO axis. All those peaks and valleys I talked about, all that endogenous progesterone, meaning your body's made progesterone, goes away. There is none. When you get a period on a birth control pill, it's just a withdrawal bleed. It's not a period. You're not ovulating. A lot of things to be true. We know that the more someone ovulates, the healthier they are, the less likely they are to have bone issues, right? The less likely they are to have metabolic issues and different issues as they age. Ovulation is healthy. And we also know that the birth control, it does a lot of things to the gut, right? It depletes zinc, magnesium, B vitamins, and it can change something called sex hormone binding globulin, which responds to estrogen being taken orally, can go up pretty high, can bind and kind of mess up thyroid function. So I do see a lot of thyroid abnormalities. And I do see that women who were on the pill for 10 years or more, I think there is some clinical data around this, but this is my subjective clinical observation, treating hundreds and hundreds of women. People who have been on the pill for 10 years or more have many more issues.
Got it.
In terms of hormonal stuff and maybe earlier menopause, other consequences and things like that. And then, things like the Depo-Provera shot, we know it reduces bone density. I mean, there's all kinds of issues. And it doesn't mean just like I don't think that SSRIs are categorically wrong. Antidepressants, birth control isn't categorically wrong. And it's not I recommended recently that one of my younger teenage patients, get a Mirena IUD because we had done all these other things and it was just too much at her phase of life. And she wasn't ready to have her health awakening moment. She needed to cope and finish high school. She was in a very competitive school. And so that was a really good choice for her. But they're good for acute circumstances for short periods of time. But we should always be counseling women on these risks. And we're never doing that. And we should be talking to them about the value of ovulation and the value of cycling regularly and the health benefits, because the evidence is there. We know that. And it's interesting to see some of the leaders in the menopause space on the traditional side change their tune about these things, where they used to be pretty ubiquitous and unified around birth control is totally fine, to now even questioning their own practice around maybe it's not great if we put a bunch of women on birth control for 10 years. That is being questioned now. So I'm hopeful.
Good. So it really comes down to, and I feel the same way when it comes to modern medicine versus this holistic foundational approach. And it all relates back to the same mission that I'm on, which is making conscious choices for yourself and asking questions. What are some maybe questions or red flags that you would say to the women out there who feel like they're being underserved with their current medical provider?
I have some really good ones. So if you're offered trazodone or antidepressants for your perimenopause symptoms,
got it,
right? And it's not addressed as a hormonal issue, but it's addressed as a symptom issue. If you're offered birth control for your perimenopause, right, then we're treating down the chain symptoms and we're not actually restoring that was lost, and we're not doing a health additive thing. We're reducing symptoms, so maybe making your quality of life better, but long-term, not to your benefit. If you're still cycling and you're being told to take daily progesterone, I think that's a red flag. Again, maybe someone likes that, but I think we're not respecting physiology. And I just think in general, I have a very specific way of practicing, but I really try to the best of my ability to honor what that person's goals are. So if you feel like you're not really being listened to, or no one's making eye contact with you, or you're just kind of getting a bunch of prescriptions that no one even explained. I hear all the time that women are like, oh yeah, I went to the pharmacy and like I picked up the prescription and I read it and like it was Wellbutrin and that's like an antidepressant. They didn't even know. They were just told like, I'm going to give you something for your menopause. It'll help you sleep and lose weight. Like that, is just a hard no for me.
Got it. Yeah, those are all really good tips and insights. And I think it's taking control of your health and not being afraid to say, you know what, this might not be right.
Yeah.
And there are other resources.
Yep.
Thank God, like yourself. So where would people go to book with you? You now have your license not only here in Ohio, but multiple states.
Lots of 16.
Incredible. So whether you're local or from a distance, you can utilize Emily's incredible resource. How do they book with you?
Yeah. So just AureliaHealth.com, AURELIA health.com. You can also always DM me on Instagram. I respond to every single message personally.
Told you she's a real one. That's like how you know.
I'm like leaving voice messages from my closet at 10:30 p.m. But I think we're in this interesting era where people are so tired of like mass experiences, and I never intend to grow my practice to bigger than like 1,000 people. I think that relationships are the medicine, and we need to protect that with everything. And so I'm very interested in anything that's, what's the word? Anything, I want to say allopathic, algorithm, analog.
Yes.
I'm really like into anything analog right now, like personal connection, one-to-one conversation. You've got a friend that needs help, send them my way, I'll talk to them. Like,
very cool.
Because that's how women are amazing. Like if every woman who gets better and gets help, we always share it.
Yes.
And we always pay it forward. We're not stingy about it. We want to help everybody around us. And so we've really grown almost exclusively from word of mouth and referral and from organic social media. And, I'm really proud of that because it's really authentic and we're real people. And when you come to us, like you get a provider who's your partner and your friend, and they know your partner's name, and they know your kids' names and your dog's names and your job situation. And I think that's how medicine should be.
It is. And it's kind of the lost art. I've learned just as much from the people in my community who've been willing to share their experiences with me as that I give recommendation wide out. It's like we're learning from each other always. And it's such a powerful thing. Emily is going to give our Cheeky community a special offer for listeners. It's really badass. $100 off the hormone deep dive, which is the comprehensive entry point for women looking for a more precise and personalized understanding of their hormones, metabolism, and overall health. So all of you guys who are struggling, please reach out and you can use code Cheeky100 to book with Emily. Thank you so much for offering that.
You're so welcome. It's my pleasure.
Amazing to meet you and talk with you. You're a wealth of knowledge.
It's been a treasure.
I'm going to read The Red Tent. Is that what it's called?
Yeah. You gotta. Wait. It's like write a passage.
I can't
And then
wait.
Follow it up with The Alchemist and you'll be like set for
I
life.
love The Alchemist.
Like those two were my formative literature.
I can't believe I don't know The Red Tent, so I'm going to add it.
Yeah. Change your life.
Emily, thank you for all you do for the community, for women, and really as a pioneer in the healthcare space for women. We are so grateful.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming on the show, girl.
Oh, you're the best.
If you guys liked this episode, please like and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. Leave a comment. You can follow Emily at
Emily Sadri _NP
for BS-free, real content that we love. Please join the Cheeky community at TheCheekyClean. You can shop clean collagen and other supplements and products coming soon at consciouscart.com. And we will see you next week. Thanks again.
Thank you.